Right now on Matter of Fact, two freshman congressmen divided by party but open to compromise.
I heard from my constituents is, please lower the rhetoric.
They're frustrated that we haven't been able to get done what we promised.
We've got a question for them.
Do you feel like you're working more across the aisle?
And he's a member of the House of Representatives.
At one point, I was here undocumented. Now I'm a member of Congress.
Find out what he'd do to reform immigration in America. Plus, holy moly, a group of nuns lead a prayerful protest to stop a pipeline on their property. Can they claim this Pennsylvania cornfield is sacred land? And get a look inside the eye of a hurricane. Find out who flies the dangerous skies to protect millions of lives.
I'm Soledad O'Brien. Welcome to Matter of Fact. This week it was back to work, back to school, and back to business for Congress. The House has been off since July 28th, August 3rd for the Senate, and they're greeted by a long list of unfinished business: hurricanes and health care, immigration, and North Korea. And in order for the government to pay its bills, they're going to have to raise the debt ceiling above the $20 trillion mark. For Congress to act on these pressing issues, the parties are going to have to reach across the aisle. In that spirit, we've got two first-term legislators joining me. Republican Jim Banks represents Indiana's 3rd District, which includes Fort Wayne. Democratic Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy represents Illinois' 8th District, including a portion of Chicago. Nice to have you guys back.
Great to be back.
We did this for the first 100 days. Let's do it again. Are you feeling more hopeful than the last time we spoke? Where are we? I mean, you guys are first term in. How are you feeling about how it's gone?
It was good to go home in the month of August
Yeah.
and visit with constituents, listen to their concerns.
Many
their
Congresspeople did not say
frustrations.
it was good to go home. They were sort of stressed by what they were hearing. Why was it good for you?
It was a healthy part of the process to go home, listen directly to my constituents about what is on their minds.
What do they want you to address? Top 3.
They're frustrated. They're frustrated about health care. One way or another, they're frustrated that we haven't been able to get done what we promised we would do in addressing health care issues. They're hopeful about tax reform and economic issues of continuing to grow the economy, create good-paying jobs, pass a tax reform package. And I think more than anything that I hear, aside from that these days, they're concerned about North Korea, what's going on around the world, and they want Congress to restore the strength of our military to combat the threats that we face.
What's on the list of your constituents? We talked about North Korea hundreds or so days ago when we last spoke. What are your constituents telling you? And are you getting happy, helpful conversations or hostile, frustrated conversations?
Here are some of the things that I hear. One, we want more bipartisanship and we want results. That's above all else. That's what I hear over and over again. Two, you know, I'm in the middle class, or I aspire to be in the middle class, and I'm having a really hard time either getting there or staying there because my childcare, education expenses, healthcare expenses are going up, and my wages have flatlined. And then 3, I think they're just really concerned that, you know, their children are not going to be doing as well or better than they did economically.
It's sort of the promise of the American dream. It's interesting. Your lists actually are a bit of a Venn diagram, kind of matching up on a lot of stuff. Let's talk about North Korea. You've been briefed.
Yes.
The entire Congress has been briefed. A lot of Democrats walked out of that briefing very concerned. How did you feel about that briefing?
I walked out of it concerned.
About what?
We're seeing more and more launches of missiles by the North Koreans, so escalating tensions. We're seeing, you know, unfortunately, our allies not working well together. The United States criticizing South Korea at a time when we need to be working with them. We need the Chinese and the Russians to really exert their leverage over the North Koreans. Another thing I heard from my constituents is, please lower the rhetoric. Enough tweets, enough bombastic rhetoric. Let's go back to diplomacy and solve this thing.
You serve on the Armed Services Committee, former Navy guy, if I remember correctly. Give me your assessment of the rhetoric around the North Korea threat. When we talked 100 or so days ago, it was an issue, but it wasn't an issue that had actually kind of trickled down to voters in a lot of ways.
Well, what we know today that we didn't know when we were together 100 days ago is that North Korea possesses the capabilities that they possess that could potentially reach missiles that could reach the United States of America or our territories. So the sobering reality of what North Korea is capable of doing is what is most troubling today to every member of Congress who sat through the briefing and every American who's watching the news. So what can we do about it? We can pass the National Defense Authorization Act that the House passed a few months ago. That's what we can control. I can't control the president's Twitter feed or the White House's rhetoric.
Sometimes it feels to me the rhetoric in general is just so hostile. Do you feel like you're making inroads?
I think so. Yeah, I'll just give you one example. I'm proud to say I passed my first major piece of legislation in the House. This had to do with modernizing career, technical, and vocational education laws. It passed not only with bipartisan support, but unanimously. And so Congressman G.T. Thompson, the Republican from Pennsylvania, who's the top Republican, and myself, we did a home and away tour in August where I went to Pennsylvania in his district and touted the bill to, you know, mainly Republican and conservative constituency. And then he did the same in my district. And so people love that. And I think there's a lot of...
Wait, working together?
Yeah.
Americans love
How about that?
What?
Yeah.
I am shocked, gentlemen, shocked. We'll see you back here in another 100 days or so. Thank you for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Soledad.
Next on Matter of Fact, he came to the U.S. a child of undocumented parents.
Thanks to a Republican president, Ronald Reagan, I was able to become a citizen.
Now he's in Congress, working for immigration reform.
So are you willing to fund a border wall for the Dreamer security?
And later, first Harvey, now Irma. The hurricanes wreaking havoc with millions of lives.
They potentially lost their home. They may even lost the location of their job.
How can we pay for the recovery?
DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, was President Obama's attempt to save so-called Dreamers from deportation. Dreamers are undocumented immigrants who are brought to the country as children. Now that President Donald Trump is ending the program in 6 months, will the promises of DACA be a dream deferred or a dream denied? There are an estimated 800,000 people working, living, and studying under the protection of DACA, which means no deportation for 2 years, and eligibility for a work permit. And as those permits run out, Dreamers could face removal from what is, for many, the only country they've ever known. Representative Ruben Kihuen, who came to the United States with his undocumented parents at age 8, is a first-term member of Congress. He represents the 8th District of Nevada. He's also a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, which is facing the daunting challenge of unifying Republicans and Democrats around legislation to try to save the Dreamers with this 6-month deadline. It's nice to have you, and to see you again.
Thank you,
so is this deadline an impossibility to bring some kind of an agreement when we're talking about immigration reform that people have done, attempted unsuccessfully for 16 years?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. You know, I myself was a dreamer. At one point, I was here undocumented. Now I'm a member of Congress. So, you know, to tell these dreamers just a few days ago that we love you, you know, I love dreamers, and then take away the status a few days later, I think it's very, you know, it's disheartening, very disappointing. But nevertheless, now it's in the hands of Congress. We have to come up with a solution to make sure that these 800,000 young Americans, including 13,000 Nevadans, have an opportunity at the American dream, a permanent solution. Back in 2013, we actually had a compromise bill that both Republicans and Democrats agreed on that got more than 60 votes in the Senate, and unfortunately came to the House of Representatives, didn't get the vote that it deserved, and now again, we're in the position where we have to renegotiate, and I believe that we can make that happen.
Can you do it in 6 months, realistically? I mean, I almost think of that example you just gave as Exhibit A of why this might not work. You were so close and still, ultimately, couldn't get it across the finish line.
I believe right now the sense of urgency is to help these 800,000 young Americans, the dreamers. They are right now, again, going to our schools. They are working. They are serving in our military. They deserve reassurance that we want them in this country. After that, then we can begin the discussion on immigration reform. But again, I believe that even DACA or even passing the DREAM Act would be a Band-Aid on a broken leg, that broken leg being the broken immigration system.
So you think it's a piecemeal solution?
Look, at the end of the day, I believe that it's going to be the responsibility of the Republicans and Democrats to come up with a compromise solution that the president is willing to sign. The president has said, send me a bill and I'll sign it. That is part of the reason, according to him, why he decided to rescind the DACA program, because he wants a permanent solution.
Do you think that's true, that he decided to rescind DACA because he was really hoping for a permanent solution for immigration?
Absolutely not. I believe that Donald Trump rescinded the DACA program because he continues to pander to his shrinking base. Here's his base that catapulted him to the presidency, which generally tends to be an anti-immigrant base. If you rescind the DACA status from these 800,000 young Americans, it's going to have an adverse impact in our economy. $650 billion loss in the next 10 years by removing these young Americans. So, they're not taking anyone's jobs. If anything, some of them are entrepreneurs. They're creating jobs. It's one thing messing with the parents, another thing messing with their kids. These kids are as American as anyone who was born
here.
So
what happens if you don't get reform? If in 6 months you can't pull together something that protects dreamers?
Well, again, I believe that there's going to be some consequences paid in the next election. The American people expect us to come up with solutions. And this particular issue, though, with the dreamers, we're seeing that even Republicans are in support of giving them some sort of legalization.
What are you willing to give up? I mean, it's obviously going to be a negotiation. So are you willing to fund a border wall for dreamer security?
Look, I've always said that border protection should be a priority. When we talk about immigration reform as a whole, when we talk about, the reform of 2013, it included border protection, more funding for border agents, for technology in the border.
Border wall? Funding the wall.
Correct. So at this moment right now, we are going to begin those discussions. I'm willing to keep an open ear, an open mind, and Democrats and Republicans need to come to the table and negotiate.
We'll see what happens. Ruben Kihuen, nice to have you. Thanks for talking with us.
Next on Matter of Fact, deadly hurricanes leaving families without homes.
The average person got just over $9,000.
Could you rebuild without government help? And later,
and God said,
they built an outdoor chapel at the edge of a Pennsylvania cornfield. Why a judge called their petition to stop a pipeline a little bit corny.
Hurricane Irma hits the U.S. mainland as Houston recovers from the heartbreak of Hurricane Harvey. The cleanup there has just begun, and more than 500,000 people have already applied for federal assistance. Less than 20% of all Hurricane Harvey victims had flood insurance, and initial estimates put the potential price tag for rebuilding at $190 billion. Currently, the National Flood Insurance Program is running a $25 billion debt, and that's before any claims from Hurricane Harvey. So as Congress debates the cost of recovery, some say maybe we shouldn't be bailing out people who are living in places that are prone to disasters. Steve Ellis is vice president for the nonpartisan watchdog group Taxpayers for Common Sense. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks a lot for having me, Soledad.
You bet. What is the problem? Define the problem as it relates to how we are thinking about insurance, especially flood insurance.
Sure, there's a couple of problems. One is that we're not charging risk-based rates. So we're not charging rates that are actually commensurate to the risks that some of these properties are experiencing. But the other thing is you have an issue of adverse selection. Basically, the only people who are buying flood insurance are the people who are the most likely to use it. More than half of the 5 million policies in the flood insurance program are in Florida, Louisiana, and Texas. And as your viewers know, I mean, these are areas that are often hit by hurricanes. And so those are the ones who are paying in, and we don't have actually the revenue from less vulnerable properties paying in as well.
Well, why would anybody who's not in a floodplain buy flood insurance? That would seem to be kind of a crazy philosophy. Would you say attach it to some other kind of insurance? Well, so you're paying for it without directly paying for it?
Well, certainly everybody has some level of vulnerability to flooding. And that's what a lot of people have found out in recent years, whether you're in Colorado, which had flooding events, or Baton Rouge, or some of these other areas or places in upstate North Carolina that actually had huge flooding events just simply from rainstorm.
So what's the solution? I mean, is it making more of these flood areas mandatory flood insurance plan areas?
Well, as you might imagine, there is no one silver bullet. We need to be having some strings on disaster assistance. We need to be requiring that states and communities help themselves first. And I'm not just talking about making sure that they pay, but that they have plans in place for how to respond to a disaster. in Houston, we didn't know that Harvey was going to park itself over the city for 5 days, but we knew that Houston was going to flood. One thing to think about is the fundamental responsibility of government is to protect their citizenry. But with flood insurance, we're actually subsidizing people to be in harm's way. We're subsidizing them to rebuild in harm's way. Certainly community-wide mitigation of like restoring wetlands or creating green space and things along those lines, or creating buffer areas are going to be much more cost-effective in the long term than just simply handing out cash.
Do you worry that your message falls on deaf ears? It's such terrible timing in the wake of one storm with another storm coming in. And by the way, I think there are 2 more parked behind the one that's coming in to be saying, hey, the taxpayers are sick of funding you.
It is a tough thing. But what I've always said is that Americans, we are big-hearted, but we can't afford to be soft-headed. I'm willing to be the person that's saying these tough messages and trying to get it through. And sometimes it's only when you're writing a check for $50 billion after Sandy, or whatever it ends up being here after
90 at this moment.
Yeah, that's the estimates. There's a fog of disaster, just like there's a fog of war, and nobody really knows what the cost is. But anyway, whatever the number is, it's a big number, and then that's when we have to be talking about this, and then hopefully we can continue the conversation as in between disasters and get the policies in place, because you're right. It's really hard to seem like mean-spirited, because you're saying, well, maybe you don't deserve all this money, and maybe we can do this better. But I think that's clearly what we're going to have to do, is have the discussion during the disaster and after the disaster.
Steve Ellis, nice to talk with you.
Thank you, Soledad. I really appreciate being here.
You bet.
Coming up next, nuns are making a habit out of protesting, why they refuse to give up this cornfield cathedral. And later, extreme weather won't ground Kermit and Miss Piggy. Get an inside look at the serious work of the hurricane hunters, nicknamed for your favorite Muppets.
And now, a weekly feature that we call We're Paying Attention Even If You're Too Busy. We've got an update. Remember those Pennsylvania nuns who built an outdoor chapel on land they owned right in the path of a planned pipeline? They knew it was a long shot, dedicated in July. They did it to stop an energy company from delivering natural gas coming from Pennsylvania's fracking fields. Well, the nuns, members of the Adorers of the Blood of Christ, said their action was an act of social justice intended to protect the environment. It forced the company building the Atlantic Sunrise Pipeline to go to court if it wanted to access their land. Well, last week, a U.S. District Court judge ruled against the nuns, saying they didn't show evidence of how their religious belief would be abridged by the pipeline. Despite the ruling, the nuns aren't giving up. They've filed suit in federal court, once again pushing back construction of the pipeline in their cornfield.
When we return, this is what hurricane hunters see as they fly into the wall of the hurricane, how their bravery saves lives.
Our thoughts this weekend are with those in the path of Hurricane Irma and those digging out from Hurricane Harvey. Advance warnings about the possible track of the storm and its intensity have no doubt saved lives. And though the science of forecasting is sometimes faulty, the information we do have, we owe in part to some heroic pilots and their incredible flying machines. Meet Kermit and Miss Piggy, two of the toughest turboprop aircraft in the skies. To help predict the path and the strength of the approaching storms, these planes slice through the eye wall of a hurricane, battling howling winds and blinding rain to enter the eye of the storm. The pilots who captured these images of Irma earlier in the week work for NOAA, that's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. On missions lasting 8 to 10 hours, they use the specially equipped planes to collect data on pressure, temperature, wind direction, and speed. To get a detailed look at the structure of the storm, their radar systems take vertical and horizontal scans, giving us a real-time look at the power of Mother Nature. In the end, they give millions of people living in disaster-prone areas details and warnings about the threats. And since these folks won't let the weather conditions ground them, it's very good news for us. I'm Soledad O'Brien. We're keeping a good thought for all of you. We'll see you back here next week on Matter of Fact.